Hello, welcome to ExpressBook Insights. The book I'm introducing to you today is Controlling People. How to recognize, understand, and deal with people who try to control you. Perhaps many of us have experienced situations where we feel things are slipping out of our control unconsciously. Some people find themselves unable to defend themselves in social relationships, while others habitually conform to family decisions and accommodate others' opinions. Some may feel manipulated and constantly directed to do things, finding it difficult to refuse. If you've encountered such situations in life, be cautious as you might be under someone else's control. Control involves using verbal or body language to restrict others' actions or manipulate their environment to align with one's own ideas. It can occur in various relationships, such as within organizations or on a personal level. For instance, cults control people's thoughts, even leading them to collective suicides. However, control more commonly manifests in intimate relationships. Intimate relationships, as discussed in the book, Controlling People, How to Recognize, Understand, and Deal with People Who Try to Control You, refer not only to romantic and parent-child relationships, but also encompass significant connections in psychology, such as those with colleagues in the workplace. The author, Patricia Evans, is a researcher and practitioner in the field of interpersonal relationships. The book helps readers understand the nature of the desire for control, why individuals find themselves trapped, and, more importantly, it provides methods to break free from control and regain control of one's life. Today, I will interpret the concept of the desire for control in 4 parts. 1. Identifying control dynamics. 2. Understanding the motivation behind control, often disguised as love. 3. The harm caused to the controlled party by control. 4. Breaking free from control dynamics to regain autonomy in life. Part 1. I will outline the key features of controlling relationships to facilitate accurate identification. Typically, control manifests in 4 distinct characteristics. The first involves a subtle sense of contradiction, where the desire to leave exists alongside an unclear understanding of the underlying issue. For instance, a partner may consistently dictate behavior, claiming it's for the other person's good, leading to self-denial and frequent setbacks. It's crucial to observe internal feelings of being controlled. The second characteristic of control is judgmental language. Even when you know you are not as described, the other person insists they understand you best, hastily defining you. This scenario is commonly observed in parent-child relationships. The third feature of control involves requests that are difficult to refuse. As rejection implies betrayal, this often occurs in the workplace, where a friendly colleague seeks your assistance, making it challenging for you to decline, even if you refuse. It is entirely reasonable, however, if the person makes you feel obligated to help, due to your friendship. They may be exerting control and shifting responsibility onto you. The fourth feature of control is the violation of personal boundaries. This includes both physical violations, such as domestic violence, and emotional violations, like continuous belittlement or denial, by one party towards another. These actions signal the onset of control. For example, parents may habitually instruct their children on what they should or should not do, whether intentional or unintentional, constituting controlling behavior. Part 2. Let's explore why control often occurs under the guise of love. Controllers often manipulate others under the pretext of love, asserting authority with statements like "I'm doing this for your own good," or "Our relationship is strong. Why refuse to help?" This is an attempt to mask their true intention. The underlying reason for control is a deep-seated sense of being out of control in their own lives. Despite projecting dominance, controllers live in constant internal turmoil and resort to controlling others as a coping mechanism. To illustrate, consider a case where a man criticizes and suppresses his wife, creating emotional distress in therapy. It becomes evident that the man fears losing control over his carefully constructed marital bubble. This bubble represents a controlled environment, where his wife should conform to his expectation. The fear of losing this imagined world drives him to control his wife. These controlling behaviors often manifest as overpowering expressions of love. Controllers insist on arranging everything for the other person, believing that their imagined version is the only acceptable reality. This suffocating love aims to keep the person under control and maintain the controller's perceived sense of security. In essence, controllers use love as a tool for control due to their inner struggle with a lack of control over their own lives. The strategy involves creating a fantasy world where external factors align with their desires, ensuring a semblance of order and preventing the perceived threat of losing control. Part 3. What harm does control inflict on individuals? There are 4 main harms undermining psychological boundaries. The first harm involves undermining an individual's psychological boundaries. which represent the necessary safety distance in our minds. Mature individuals require well-established psychological boundaries, allowing them to distinguish their feelings and thoughts from external influences. Without these boundaries, individuals struggle to understand themselves, leading to difficulty in forming equal relationships. For instance, if someone consistently imagines and interprets the actions of others without seeking their perspective, it impedes building healthy connections, creating a fragmented self. The second harm results in a fragmented self state, where individuals feel a division between their outward presentation and their true selves. This fragmentation acts as a psychological defense mechanism. A person may harbor conflicting emotions, as observed in cases where individuals follow external expectations while secretly desiring different actions. This internal conflict generates stress and anxiety, inhibiting authentic self-expression. The third harm makes it challenging for victims to express themselves authentically. The harm manifests as individuals consistently maintaining a false self, feeling exhausted from constant pretense, as if wearing a mask that hinders genuine expression. Despite the desire to refuse, many end up accepting situations, leading them further away from their true selves. In counseling, a recurring pattern is identified among such individuals, shaped by the common experience of high expectations imposed by dominant parents. Parents often harbor aspiration for their children to fulfill their own unmet goals. An example is illustrated by a father, seasoned in the business world, insisting that his daughter pursue a stable government job as he prescribes every aspect of her life. It takes the daughter until her 30s to realize that this life is not what she truly desires, creating new controllers. The fourth and most significant harm of control is the creation of new controllers. Many controlling behaviors originate in parent-child relationships, particularly impactful on young children whose psychological boundaries have yet to form. Children are susceptible to parental intrusion on their psychological boundaries, leading to them accepting and later adopting these controlling behaviors. An example is given of a 3-year-old boy, Jack, who after a fall is told by his parents that he's not really hurt, but seeking attention, denying his genuine feelings. This type of communication becomes habitual, causing children to lose touch with their true feelings, potentially growing up to become controllers themselves. In summary, the harms of a controlling relationship include the erosion of psychological boundaries, the development of a fragmented self, inhibition of authentic self-expression, and the risk of creating new controllers, particularly if the victim is a child, who may perpetuate these controlling behaviors into adulthood. For those who are being controlled, how can they break free from control and regain control of their lives? This is the fourth part we're discussing today. The first step to break free from control is to recognize the coercive forces in the relationship. Coercive forces refer to using unnatural methods to connect with others, such as making demands, unequal interactions, or judgmental language. Anything attempting to control the other person's behavior to meet one's own desires is considered a coercive force. Controllers, whether in intimate relationships or towards the controlled, harbor fantasies. They struggle to distinguish between fantasy and reality, insisting that the other person cannot leave and must fulfill their imagination limitlessly. Now, let's specifically understand the common strategies employed by controllers. The first strategy is refusing equal communication. Equal communication involves a two-way exchange of thoughts and ideas. Controllers seldom inquire about the other person's perspective. If the other person's thoughts differ, the controller may lose control and often resorts to drawing conclusions, usually personal attacks. For instance, if a wife complains about her husband's behavior, the controlling husband might say, "You always ruin everything." The second strategy is replacing consensus with commands. Mothers might tell their children, "You must go to bed before 10 p.m. or you must come home immediately after school. No playing at friends' houses." When the child expresses a different opinion, the mother may use statements like, "Why are you becoming so disobedient?" This strategy is often observed in hierarchical relationships, where superiors use this approach to control subordinates or children. The third strategy is not responding to the topic of conversation. This implies that by not responding, the controller pretends the other person and their ideas don't exist. Even when a response is given, it may not be heartfelt because the controller doesn't see the other person as having independent thoughts. For example, a wife may incessantly talk at home, while the husband rarely speaks. People may perceive the wife as the troublemaker, but the husband's non-responsiveness denies the wife's needs. Becoming a control strategy, the wife's nagging is, in fact, a result of not receiving responses over time, and the husband dismissively concludes that the problem lies with the wife's excessive talking. The The fourth strategy is using temporary commitments to eliminate conflicts. Controllers often make promises like, "Okay, I'll do it right away," only to set things aside later. They may never fulfill promises, displaying inconsistency and keeping the other person disappointed. Individuals with a history of domestic violence, for instance, might promise not to repeat their actions after causing harm, using temporary commitments to maintain control and keep the other person in the relationship. Once these coercive forces are identified, the next step is to establish clear personal boundaries in the relationship. For instance, a woman in counseling reveals her struggle with her mother's overbearing wishes for her future. She finds it hard to reject her mother's constant interference. Unable to assert her own needs, the therapist discovers that she lacks personal boundaries and has difficulty determining how she wants to be treated or forming independent thoughts. She responds to questions about her personal thoughts by citing what her mother, friends, or books say, resembling a child who needs guidance, rather than a 30-year-old adult. To effectively establish clear personal boundaries, individuals should be cautious when feeling judged by others. They can defend themselves and set personal boundaries by articulating their needs, even if it's challenging, particularly with familiar people. For example, when less familiar individuals provide unsolicited advice or criticize your actions, firmly ask them, what did you say? If they persist, politely smile and refrain from responding. This subtle approach helps in experiencing the act of setting boundaries intuitively in the early stages of a relationship. Boundaries should be clearly defined to prevent coercive issues from taking root in a relationship lacking open communication. To avoid being unconsciously controlled, individuals can proactively ask questions about the nature of the relationship, identify differences, and understand where the relationship should evolve. This questioning prompts the other person to consider your needs, fostering mutual understanding, for instance. Additionally, individuals can practice politely saying no when they feel unable to refuse others. This method is effective when someone expresses goodwill, but the individual must clarify the limits of their capabilities. For example, tell the person, "I appreciate your kindness and I'd like to help, but due to certain reasons I can only do this much, and fortunately, there are some things I cannot do." This approach is about delineating responsibilities and preventing the other person from shifting all responsibilities to you. Simultaneously, it poses a question to the other person: is this truly for my benefit? Or is there your own desire involved? The final method to break free from control is embracing authenticity. Authenticity is not merely a method but an attitude toward life. When individuals believe in their inner feelings, coexisting with their experiences, even those less pleasant, they come closer to the truth. This involves avoiding an artificial life and refraining from forcing oneself or others to conform to unrealistic fantasies. Here's a story about Keep It Real. A seemingly perfect couple ended their relationship in failure, leaving many unable to understand what happened between them. In reality, they themselves couldn't understand, as everything seemed so perfect. When one of them broke the illusion, they both had the opportunity to see the problems in their intimate relationship. It turned out, the boy always wanted to give the girl the best of everything, putting in all his effort to ensure she was never dissatisfied, hoping she would live in a fairy tale forever. This might sound perfect, but love gradually changed. They both stopped connecting with each other truthfully, and the boy silently bore all the hardships. In fact, he deprived the other of the right to face difficulties together. The girl seemed carefree, but the boy's efforts made her hesitate to express dissatisfaction, making it harder for her to refuse his kindness. Control seeped into the relationship, and the once healthy love soured. The girl couldn't help but feel, if we both had relaxed a bit, expressing exhaustion when needed and saying no when necessary, perhaps the outcome would have been different. In summary, control often disguises itself as expressions of love in intimate relationships, impacting the psychological boundaries of the controlled and preventing them from being themselves easily. Strategies such as establishing personal boundaries and adopting an authentic attitude towards life can be employed to break free from control. Congratulations on completing another book. Thank you for listening to this book summary. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share this valuable knowledge with your friends. Thank you. And see you in the next video.